Welcome back to the channel. Black is One. As you know, this is a platform dedicated to the unification of all black people everywhere so that we can build and prosper. Depending on when you'll be watching this video, it will be National Heroes Day in Jamaica. It is a day that the government has set aside to honor and to recognize 7 people who have made the ultimate sacrifice to shave away or to minimize the load of the black masses in the past. So I'm doing this video with 2 motives. Number 1, to pay tribute to the heroes, and number 2, to then put the heroes together and then pull a moral from their story to see what example we can take from their lives that can be relevant to our struggles here in 2022. So this will be the format of the video. I'll give you a brief overview of each of the heroes. Then, as I said, I'll put all of them together and then try to take out that one thing, that one common thread, that runs through all of them. And after that, I'll just conclude. So I'd want you to stay until the end of the video so that you can hear what is that common thread and to get my reflection. So let's do this. So as they would say, ladies first. So I'm going to start with Nani of the Maroons. Now, this was the military and spiritual leader for the Maroon community in the early 1700s. What they would do is that slaves who ran away from their masters would form communities in these hills, hard to reach places away from the plantation, a kind of sanctuary for runaway slaves. So Nani was one of the chiefs, one of the elders for one of those communities. Now, what makes her story heroic is that even though she was not formally trained in the military, she was nevertheless a very skilled military tactician and an expert at guerrilla warfare. Another thing is that she used her African spiritualism as part of her war kit, as part of her art of war, so to speak, to confuse and to confound and to outdo the mighty British military. She was a person who valued freedom over peace. So she was prepared to fight to the death. Kwawan Kojo, elders and leaders in other Maroon settlements, they signed peace treaties with the British. She didn't. And she was very upset that they had signed based on what the terms for those peace treaties were. One of the terms was that the Maroon settlement would no longer be used as a sanctuary for runaways. So they would effectively have to sign that any slave that ran away would have to be returned to the plantation. Another term is that whites must now live in the Maroon settlements, well, which is a spy really, and that Maroons could now be deployed to fight the enemies of the British. So she was very upset when her brothers signed peace treaty with the British. As I said before, part of her legacy and legend is her use of African spirituality as part of her military strategy to free slaves and to maintain the freedom of her community. Of course, it was demonized and outlawed by the British because they feared it, they didn't understand it, and they couldn't control it. Now, the actual circumstances of Nani's death remain unknown, but what she represents is feminine prowess, that never say die kind of spirit that would have passed down the ages to other ordinary Jamaicans and eventual heroes. So that was Nani. I'm going to move on now to hero number 2, Marcus Garvey. Now, Marcus Garvey is kind of like my favorite hero, in the sense that I don't know, I feel somewhat closer to Garvey than to anybody else. Maybe it is because he is one of the person who left a lot of reading material in his own handwriting, where you can read and get to know the person, to know the personality a little bit better. But needless to say, Marcus Garvey was the first national hero of Jamaica. This Jamaican established and led one of the largest black organizations in history, the UNIA. So when they talk about a black power champion, a heavyweight, a trailblazer, a trendsetter, the quintessential black activist and philosopher, the quintessential black thinker, you're talking about a Marcus Garvey. But what I realize is that what most people know about Marcus Garvey is that he was born in St. Ann and that he was the first national hero, and his date of birth and his place of death and burial and stuff like that. And everybody know two quotes from Marcus Garvey. That he said that a people without a knowledge of their past history, origin and culture is like a tree without roots. And without self-confidence, you are twice defeated in the race of life, but with confidence, you have won even before you started. Most people know those things about Marcus Garvey and the general history about Marcus Garvey. But what a lot of people are not familiar with is Marcus Garvey's ism, his philosophies, his opinions, his beliefs, the things that he stood for, his principles. Things like self-reliance. He thought that black people and Africa had to be self-reliant in this world if they are going to elevate themselves on the bottom of the table. The idea that the black man is supposed to be able to economically, or the black man is supposed to aspire to be economically able to stand on his own, is one of the central themes about Garvey's ism, about his philosophies, that a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know about his emphasis on education. He's a man that was self-educated, a very avid reader, who established a lot of schools for black people, where students would learn from the black perspective, where students were to be trained to solve black people's problem. Yes, he was into the arts and poetry and songs and into theater. That was one side of Marcus Garvey. But his main focus was on education. People don't talk about the political Marcus Garvey, that he had his own political party, that he ran for political office, that he understood as a philosophy that black people, to change their fortunes, had to become involved into the politics, because politics, determines how the money or how the resources of a country is shared or is distributed. So as black people, we won't get anything if we are not there when anything is being shared. It is that simple. And that was a part of Marcus Garvey's philosophy. As I said before, I could go on and on talking about Marcus Garvey because I declare my bias that I am closer to Marcus Garvey than to anybody else. But one of the things that a lot of people don't know about Marcus Garvey is that he was a Christian, a Roman Catholic, and somehow, even despite his Christian faith, he was still willing and was still sensitive to racial issues and racial matters. But anyway, I don't want to finish the video on Marcus Garvey, so let me move on to the third national hero, Sam Sharp, Daddy Sharp. This man was born into slavery on the Kensington estate in St. James. He too was a Christian, was a leader of the Baptist church. The circumstances out of which Sam Sharp emerged a hero surrounds a strike that he planned for Christmas Day in the year 1831, where he wanted better treatment for the slaves and that freedom from slavery to be considered by the planters. So word about the strike spread to other parishes like Chilani and Westmoreland, Manchester and St. Elizabeth from St. James. So what was supposed to be a peaceful strike that started on Christmas Day, 1831, by the 27th of December, things spiraled out of control. The Great House and Kensington estate was set on fire, and as you can imagine, chaos everywhere. By the rebellion ended in early January, 14 whites and 500 blacks were dead. Many of the blacks who were killed were tried and hanged on spot. Sam Sharp himself was hanged and buried like a common criminal in the sands of the Montego Bay Harbor. His body was later recovered and buried under the pulpit of the Birchill Baptist Church, of which he was a member. In the aftermath of the rebellion, the following year, 1832, an abolition bill was passed in Britain, and slavery was abolished eventually in 1838. Number 4 on the list is Paul Bogle. He hails from Stonygut in St. Thomas, a Baptist deacon and a supporter of another national hero by the name of George William Gordon, who was a politician in the parish at the time. Paul Bogle is known for the Manley Rebellion that happened in 1865. Although slavery had been abolished in 1838 following the Christmas Rebellion led by Sam Sharp, the country was still governed by the same old quote-unquote masters. They were the persons in charge of the economy. So as you can imagine, the black masses were not being dealt with justly, were not being dealt with fairly. It was the same old oppressive ways. So how the Manley Rebellion started is that Paul Bogle led a delegation from Stonygut in St. Thomas to Spanish Town, about 45 miles on foot, to meet with the governor of Jamaica at the time, a man by the name of Edward John Eyre. Now, after covering 45 miles on foot to meet with the governor to present their grievances to him, the governor refused to give them any audience. This was August 12, 1865. And the actual rebellion that we're talking about, it happened in 1865, October 11. So those 2 months in between, just let's say that relations between the crown and the black masses in St. Thomas, let's just say relations deteriorated. So on October 11, 1865, Paul Bogle with 200 men marched on the Manley courthouse. And like in the case of the Christmas Rebellion, all hell broke loose. Chaos and dead bodies all over the place. An approximate number of 500 persons were killed in that uprising. Similar treatment as in the Christmas Rebellion, persons were tried and spot and shot and hanged. Paul Bogle was hanged on October 24, 1865. In the aftermath of his execution, England got more involved in the governing of the country. And John Eyre, the governor, that refused to see Paul Bogle, he was charged with murder, eventually acquitted, but he was fired. And then the crown decided to do some economic and social reforms on the island. So that was Paul Bogle. Now moving on to George William Gordon. Before I even go on to George William Gordon, I want to say that these 3 heroes that I'll be talking about next. Throughout high school, doing history and social studies, I always wonder how in a black majority country where the black masses were under the oppression of a white minority, how in that scenario, a white people, how did people of their complexion turned out to be heroes, to have sacrificed their lives for black people, because I thought that these guys were white. But doing the research for this video, I came across some information that made everything make sense. Now back to George William Gordon. Now this is one hero that, in my opinion, even though he get recognized as a national hero, I think his circumstances were quite unfortunate, It's almost like he became national hero by accident, because the charges for which he was executed, he denied them to his very last breath. George William Gordon, despite his complexion, is not white. His mother was a slave and his father was a planter. So he was mixed race. He was a Baptist minister. He was into politics. He had land. As I said before, that he was very good friends with Paul Bogle. What he would do was to encourage the black masses to oppose the colonial system. He was the person who sent Paul Bogle to Governor Eyre with the grievances of the people of St. Thomas. So how did he become a hero? Well, after the 1865 rebellion led by Paul Bogle, he was accused of being a co-conspirator with Paul Bogle. So he was guilty by association. It is said that despite his insistence that he was not involved, the colonial authorities said that he must have been involved, because a rebellion of that scale and with that amount of quote-unquote success could not have been planned by a black man, which would be Paul Bogle. So he was hanged, really, for being a friend of Paul Bogle on October 23, 1865. And Paul Bogle was hanged the day after, October 24, 1865. In the aftermath of his execution, pretty much the same as I said for Paul Bogle, that England get more involved in the running of the country. John Eyre was charged with murder, was eventually fired, and there were some social and economic policies that were put into place that sort of eased the pressure on black people. Now the last two eras, Norman Washington Manley and Sir Alexander Bustamante, like the previous two that I dealt with, Paul Bogle and George William Gordon, their story are intertwined. George William Gordon and Paul Bogle, their story intertwined because of their friendship. Now for Norman Manley and Bustamante, their stories are intertwined because they were blood related, they were cousins. Both of these gentlemen were mixed race as well. At first glance they may seem white, but as I said, I always wondered, how did people of their complexion get to become national heroes? In the sense that, what would have motivated them to have paid the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of black people? Well, a part of the answer, in my mind, is found in the fact that they were Jamaicans by birth. So they were born into the system, and they were mixed race. Norman Manley's grandfather married twice. He was a white man, and the two times that he got married to black women. Anyway, both of these men emerged out of the socio-economic turmoils of the 1930s. Bad economy, poor working condition, and labor unrest all over the place, due to the same old masters with their same old policies. But in their mind, they didn't think that Jamaica needed another bloody revolution. Based on what they saw, their interpretation of the times, they figured that what Jamaica needed was a chance at self-governance, a chance to determine our own destiny. So Norman Manley, as a barrister, represented the disenfranchised workers, the black masses, joined up with the trade union movement that was taking place in the 1930s in response to the labor unrest that were taking place, and eventually started the PNP, the People's National Party, in 1938. Bustamante was part of the PNP at first. This was a man who defended the rights of the working class, pretty much like his cousin. At one point he went to jail for anti-colonial agitation, and guess who represented him? Norman Manley. He got released in 1943 and started his own political party, the Jamaica Labour Party, out of the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union. Norman Manley was instrumental in achieving what they call adult suffrage in 1944, because before that, not all members of the adult population were able to vote. So Norman Manley and Bustamante played a pivotal role getting it into law that all persons 18 and above should be able to vote. After the entire adult population was eligible to vote, the first election was called in 1945 and the JLP won. 10 years later, the PNP, under the leadership of Norman Manley, would have won that election before independence. Bustamante won the first election in 1962 when Jamaica became independent and became Jamaica's first prime minister. Both of these gentlemen are regarded as fathers of the nation called Jamaica, because it was out of their political struggle, their agitation, their negotiation, their guidance, their sacrifice that Jamaica got her independence. So that was my very brief overview of the 7 national heroes. Well, 6 heroes and 1 heroine. Now, to the second part of why I'm doing this video. Remember, I wanted to take a moral from their story, to put them all together and see what common thread linked all of them. And when I read through the different accounts of what took place, I realized that none of these heroes did what they did out of desperation. They were not forced by circumstances to just react. It's not like they were backed into a corner and that they had to do something and they just on impulse just did something heroic. All of them could have lived good lives without doing what they did. What they did was a matter of choice. Garvey was an educated printer and started to travel the world before he became Marcus Garvey. Nani successfully escaped slavery. She could have just vanished into the hills and forget all about those who were left back on the plantation. Sam Sharp was a slave, yes, but he could read. He had some amount of influence because he was into the church at the leadership level. He had his master's name. The name Sam Sharp is the name of his quote-unquote master. He was already about 50 years old when the Christmas Rebellion took place. He could have just conformed to the system and leave it to the youths, the next generation, to do the work. Paul Bogle was born free. He could vote. Out of a population of about 3,300 adults in Eastern St. Thomas at the time, only 104 persons were able to vote, and Paul Bogle was one of them. He was able to read. He had 500 acres of land. He was a successful farmer and a successful businessman. His friend George William Gordon could read as well, and he had the right color that could propel him at the time. His father was a planter. I would go as far as to say that he was wealthy. He was a successful businessman. Norman Manley as well. He had the right color, where he could have easily been absorbed into the political elite in the country at the time. The man was a barrister, educated in England. I'm sure he could have done other things with his life. Same with Bustamante. He had the color for success at the time. Educated. I'm certain he could have done other things with his life. But they chose to do what they did. Not that they were desperate. They were pushed into a corner that they had to. They made a choice. So the moral of the story, in my view, is this. The revolution that needs to take place can only come through the leadership and involvement of capable people who are not driven by desperation but by moral conviction to do what is right. The revolution will have to be led by people who will not use their wealth and education and privilege to take sides against the oppressed, to aid and abet an oppressive system to exploit the masses. Sometimes as a black man and as a Jamaican, it is kind of disheartening to see the people that are capable, that are educated, the very articulate ones, the ones with the talent. It is very disheartening to see them take sides against their own people. Think on these things. Before I end the video, Nani, Garvey, Bustamante, Norman Manley, Daddy Sharp, Paul Bogle, George William Gordon, wherever you are, salute. Happy National Heroes Day. Black is one. Remember to share the videos, subscribe to the channel, and as you go out there, be nice to black people, treat them well, speak well of the race, help each other, look out for each other, and live the revolution. Peace.